fellow Liberians, it is good to be back home. Very good to be back home. I returned home over the weekend from visits to Canada and the United States, where I held very important meetings with Liberians and global political, business, and educational leaders concerning the development of our country. I spoke about the urgency to deal with the food insecurity situation and improved agricultural production in Liberia. The situation cannot be resolved by resorting to tentative actions and panicked reaction to shortages and the crisis as the we as government has been prone to do over the last 5 years. We are therefore proposing a comprehensive strategy to include emergency provision of rice, our essential staple, at concessionary prices, while we pursue an accelerated and sustained program of domestic production. The program will entail intensive training of Liberians at universities in rice-producing states in the United States, provision of experts, and investment and financing for equipment and machinery. To succeed, the program must be private sector driven, while the government provides assistance and extension services. There are many databases and other sources to tap into. Liberia once hosted the headquarters of the West African Rice Development Association, WADA, which together with our Central Agricultural Research Institute, CARI, developed high-yield seeds. The International Institute for Tropical Agriculture, IITA, and other global institutions have also made commendable progress in the areas of rice production and other cash crops, such as cocoa, coffee, cashew, etc. Our government only needs to demonstrate seriousness in engaging these institutions to achieve its goals and cannot continue to play with the lives of our people by fooling them about fake shipments of rice. The legislature must assert its oversight responsibility to ensure that millions of dollars allocated for rice subsidy are properly accounted for. Our country is not poor, and our people are not lazy. Our soil is fertile, and our weather is favorable to growing what we eat and to export the surplus. What we lack is determined, competent, serious, and responsible leadership that will make the right decisions and investments in the productive sectors, rather than spend most of the national budget on enriching and caring for a few politicians. The president, the vice president, the speaker, the pro tem, and the deputy speaker, while the nation starves. Hospitals are without beds and medicines, and our schools are struggling. My fellow Liberians, from education, manufacturing, communications, to infrastructure development, we are engaged with international partners and industrialists who are prepared to invest in Liberia. However, they are concerned about the current climate of rampant corruption and abuse of power that have overtaken the WIA administration. These serious investors need a responsible and competent Liberian government that can be trusted to stop the stealing, strengthen the justice system, and improve accountability. As I have said many times before, our country is too rich for so many of our people to be so poor. This is why a Cummings administration will stop the stealing, end impunity, improve accountability, and guarantee the trust of the international community. We will do this because we need to end the suffering of the Liberian people, unite our country, grow the economy, provide opportunities for our youth, empowerment for our women, and create decent paying jobs for Liberians. The cost of living is increasing every day. This is why, for President WIA to cut people's pay while the cost of food, transportation, rent, hospital bills, school fees are only going up, is wicked. As hard as people are trying, too many cannot find jobs. And those who are lucky to be working can barely care for their families because their salaries have been, quote unquote, harmonized. President WIA and his administration promised to create jobs. Not only did they fail to keep their promise, but they have created chances for themselves to steal from the Liberian people who are already suffering. No responsible government that cares for its people will do this to them. Drugs and crimes have taken over our streets and communities. Proud Liberians are being forced to beg in a country that God has blessed with so much natural wealth. After 5 years, President WIA and his administration have no idea how to fix the problems they have made even worse. Now, as we prepare to end their failed leadership in 2023, they are conniving to create problems in the elections and undermine our hard-won democracy. We strongly warn them to desist and conduct themselves more responsibly. The last and important duty of any democratic government is to provide for the free and fair conduct of democratic elections so the people get to decide who will lead them and the transfer of power is smooth and peaceful. Repeatedly, the WIA administration has acted not to obey the constitutional demand for the timely conduct of elections. We will not permit it this time. Enough is enough. Enough is enough. Let there be no mistake. The presidential and general elections, as well as all of its attending processes and procedures, must be adhered to as provided for in the Liberian Constitution. As opposition, it is our duty to hold the Weah administration to a sworn responsibility and not allow the compromise of the character and integrity of our democracy and elections. I assure the Liberian people that we would not fail in this sacred duty. We know that since 2018, President Weah has fooled around with the conduct of the National Housing and Population Census. Less than a year before the presidential and general elections in 2023, the administration is still playing around with the conduct of the census, which is a constitutional demand. No president of Liberia who will not obey and honor the Liberian Constitution deserves to be regarded as president. Furthermore, we are alarmed about the growing perception of incompetence and corruption surrounding the contract of the vendor for the biometric voter registration. The National Elections Commission, the NEC, is strongly advised to scrupulously follow the public procurement process and contract, preferably from other democratic countries, only the most highly competent and reputable vendor, one whose track record and proved ability are impeccable and without doubt. The current controversial vendor is unacceptable. Unacceptable. We know that the credibility of free and fair elections is not determined on election day. It is the credibility and transparency of the processes that lead up to the actual voting on election day that will guarantee the credibility of the elections and safeguard our democracy. President Weah and his administration, therefore, have a duty to provide the resources that are needed and to do so in a timely manner so that the electoral processes and procedures are done credibly and within the required constitutional time frame. This is why we urge the National Elections Commission to immediately request technical assistance to execute the smooth transition to the biometric system. Obviously, the National Elections Commission has no internal experience of proved capacities, given it has never worked with a biometric system. We also demand on behalf of the Liberian people that the government pays for this much needed technical assistance. Liberia's democracy belongs to the Liberian people. Many sons and daughters fought, bled, and died for our democracy. We can outsource for expertise, but we must never outsource the proud ownership of our democracy. Owning our democracy, including by funding it, is an important measure of our independence. The Liberian government, therefore, must appropriately and adequately fund the continued credibility and integrity of Liberia's democracy. It is time to stop stealing and fund the Liberian people's cherished democracy. We are also aware that upgrading to the biometric system from the previous manual one is a matter of growing concern for many of our citizens. But we must move ahead if we are to continue to deepen democracy and guarantee its integrity. We also know that all successful transitions to the use of technology requires running the new system next to the old one. The best value of technology is to help people do their work faster, better, and more accurately. Technology, and certainly that which is related to elections, is not intended to exclude people. Running the new system next to the old will achieve more inclusion of Liberians and further ensure that the transition is relatively problem-free while deriving similar and improved outcomes. Finally, we note that the schedule of the NEC is already being dangerously delayed. We are seriously concerned about these growing delays, as well as reports of the lack of much needed resources for the National Elections Commission. Over the next few days, we will be meeting with leaders of the opposition to further discuss these lurking dangers for our democracy and to develop a combined and joint position. Meanwhile, we strongly encourage the government to act consistent with the Liberian Constitution, provide the needed resources to the NEC, and do so with urgency. We have seen the way administration fail, perform incompetently, and continue to act irresponsibly. Many have come to the conclusion that Liberia is on autopilot because our president does not know what he is doing, nor does he know what he needs to be doing. However, failure to ensure that the will of the Liberian people is truly reflected in their votes will not be a failure or act of irresponsibility we can or will be expected to accept. It is globally known that elections that are not credibly free and fair are triggers for conflict. We will act in time to ensure our election is credibly free and fair, and that our country remains peaceful and safe. We ask the president to wake up and lead his administration to do the same. I thank you, God bless you, and God bless Liberia. Thank you very much.
Distinguished members of the press, unfortunately, Mr. Cummings will not be taking any questions today. Thank you very much.
Let me take some questions. Let's take a few. We'll take 3 or 4.
All right.
Any questions for anybody? Yes, please.
Okay, yes, sir. My name is Trojan Kiazo. I report for School Network. We've already noticed, sir, which of course you mentioned, but we want to know to which degree, because we have a leg timetable which should have started since October 7th, but we've noticed that nothing has started yet, the voter registration process. It is very vital, in fact, that we are transitioning to a biometric system for the first time in Liberia's history. How concerned, deeply, to what extent, in fact, do you think the process, if it's not started on the right footing, will affect the entire electoral process?
As I mentioned in my statement, elections are mismanaged or not credibly executed, not on election day, but the processes leading up to the election. And so I am deeply, deeply concerned. That's why immediately upon my return, there were two things I wanted to focus on. One was the rice crisis and the suffering of our people, but the other area and issue is our elections. And so we're very concerned about the biometric, and if you listen to our statement program, we call for immediately getting technical assistance to NEC, because we cannot and should not transition to biometric. We gotta keep moving forward. We gotta leverage technology. But we do not have the expertise. We do not have the know-how. So let's get the expertise. It exists. It is available. Let's get the expertise. Let's pay for it. Let them work with the National Elections Commission to make sure biometric is done in the right and credible way. Let's concurrently do the manual system, so we do it in parallel, we do it at the same time, so there's check and balance. Let's get the right vendor. Let's follow our rules and processes. The NEC must follow the processes for contracting a vendor. Let's get the right vendor, one who preferably has done this work in a democracy. So the combination of those things will ensure that the biometric in the voting process happens credibly. But yes, we are very concerned about that. But we have to be responsible. We can not make recommendations. We cannot call for actions. And then, depending on how the government reacts, we will react and bring other actions to bear. It's also important that the opposition coalesce around these issues, because this affects all of us. And this is an area where we should not compete with each other. We should coalesce, and so we'll be reaching out to the other opposition parties to work together, to have common positions and common demands on the government. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cohen. My name is Emmanuel Kotu, also from the Small Network. I understand you were in the U.S. recently talking to the ANC Global, and you've also been spotted speaking to some congressmen, and from the ruling side, they're saying that you are negotiating for sanctions against the government of Liberia. So I want to know, what was your mission speaking to some of those congressmen? If it was for the interest of Liberian people, what really did you discuss with them?
So I think the government should be focusing its time and attention on doing the right things for the Liberian people, on leading our country credibly, on solving the fuel crisis, on stopping the stealing. The sanctions are a result of their actions. The sanction is not a result of Alexander Cummings or anybody else speaking to the U.S. Congress. I remind the Liberian people, I remind the Liberian government that this issue of stealing, of corruption, has been trumpeted by the Americans. When the current ambassador was going through his confirmation hearing, he talked about that. When the assistant director for the National Security Council came for the bicentennial, she talked about that. When the United States ambassador to the United Nations, former ambassador to Liberia, talked about Liberia, she talked about that. When the former Minister of State for Presidential Affairs, in a tape recording, admitted to stealing from Liberian people, to being corrupt, that's what the government should focus on. If they stop those things, there will be no need for anybody to sanction them. So, this idea that somebody is lobbying, by the way, if they're not doing the right things and the government wants to sanction them, the government should sanction them. But they have to stop the reasons for the sanction. That's what the Liberian people should focus on. Why is the president not investigating, not prosecuting those people who stole from the Liberian people that were sanctioned? He said he would do that. We're still waiting for him to investigate. Let's get to the facts. That's what it should be focused on, and not about my conversations in the United States. We are talking to the Americans, the Canadians, and others about Liberia, about the opportunities our country presents, provides, about how they can come to help us, about how they can come to help with elections integrity. That's the focus of the conversation. And the government and President Weah should focus on better governance, improving the lives of the Liberian people, stopping the suffering of the Liberian people. If they do those things, they won't have to worry about who has been to the United States.
Lastly, on the Cummings, they say thank you, Chester Smith, for helping build the event program. I'm concerned, I'd like just to report it in terms of the two system you want to work with, emergency provision of rice, the sustainable plan. I want you to be very clear as to what's the position of the CPD in terms of the emergency situation of rice. What do you want to do about it? Because you made it very clear that all the people that are bringing rice is fake. What is CPD doing in this emergency stage to ensure that the people of Liberia don't suffer from rice?
It is the responsibility of the government of Liberia to ensure that the Liberian people have rice at affordable prices on the market. As the CPP, it is our responsibility to call them out, to make recommendations which are made in my statement about how they can improve and improve that situation. But they have the resources, they have the responsibility. President Weah, his ministers, the legislators, these people get paid every month. They're not doing this work for free. They were elected, they were appointed to manage the resources of the Liberian people, to obey the Constitution of Liberia. We are going to insist as a opposition that they do that, and we are making recommendations, as I did very specifically, on what they need to do to alleviate this situation long term. But they have the resources, they have the responsibility, they have the Liberians, taxpayers' money, and it is their responsibility to do that. We can make recommendations, we can call them out, we can galvanize the Liberian people to put pressure on them, but it is their job, it is their responsibility. They get paid to do that, and that's what we're insisting that they do. Can you speak a little louder, please?
My name is Kelly Nelson. I'm from the Women Voices Institute. I've been listening to videos telling the present government talking about rice, more rice, more rice. What can we urge the Liberian people so we kind of reach short to go back to the soil?
So that's what I just said in my statement, that the government needs to enable and facilitate Liberians getting into agriculture. I mentioned, if you look at the history of our country, there were institutions based here, some of those institutions still exist that we can use and leverage. But I'm encouraging and I'm recommending that the government supports and encourages Liberians to feed themselves so that we can grow rice and other cash crops.
But in your own capacity, sir, in your own capacity, you start to go to private getting equipment to farmers. What have you in particular for your organization started in private by getting farmers equipment or other things that you know back and forth?
So I remind the Liberian people, please listen to me carefully.
Yes, sir.
It is the responsibility of the government to do that. Anything I do as an individual, I do as a private citizen, and we do many things to help the Liberian people. We provide educational opportunities, especially to the Liberian people, scholarships, schools. We provided medical supplies to the Liberian people. So when this is coming out of Alexander Cummings' pocket, out of the organization's pocket, the government has your money, the Liberian people money. And they get paid. It is their job to facilitate and enable the Liberian people. We make recommendations that we want them and they should implement that will help the Liberian people. But it is their responsibility. And what we do as private citizens to help our country, our people. We cannot do it all, and we do in areas that we believe is important for the sustainable transformation of Liberia.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all very much.
Gracias.